Everybody else is bored and doing recordings during the coronavirus lockdown, so why not me too? I'm Jim. I'm going to show you how I trim a brisket, and I'm going to explain some things that are very specific to how I work. I'm not an expert smoker or an expert trimmer, but I've done a few of these, and the way I do it matches my grill setup, Primo XL. I'll talk about that some other video maybe, and how I cook and my experience after doing a few of these. Not an expert, maybe this is helpful, maybe it's not, but I had nothing better to do. So I also like how the camera shows my coronavirus gut. Okay, so I've got what is this? This is a 20-pound prime that I got from Costco today. And a couple things about my sanitary setup here. I don't use gloves. That's because I work really hard to keep my hands clean and washed. And I see a lot of people working with gloves and they think they can, they just sort of lose their brain. They'll have their gloves on and then they'll be grabbing clean things. They'll be touching their spices. They'll be touching equipment. So they're just cross-contaminating and they think the gloves, they just kind of lose their brain. So I try to work really hard at being disciplined about using a dirty hand that touches the product and then my clean hand for working with whatever. I also am conscious that I dump the purge out into the sink, but normally it's not a great idea, but I disinfect this entire surface after I get done working. The reason I do that is I don't want all this stuff, the purge, the liquid, the blood, whatever, just festering out of my trash can for some days until the pickup comes. I don't think that's very healthy. So I'd rather get it down the sink, down the drain without splashing. And then again, I disinfect everything. So, all right, I'm going to get into it. So the best knife to use is a knife that you're comfortable with. I like this kind of boning fillet knife. It's a dowel strong. It's sharp. I like the way it's shaped. It's got a little bit of flex to it. Not that that really matters here. But I've seen people like trimming brisket with like a long carving knife. I've seen people using chef's knives. You know, probably somewhere there's a Scotsman using like some rusty old halberd. Oi, I'll just do this. Use a knife that you're comfortable with and proficient with. The big thing is have it sharp. So I use my regular knife grinder sharpener at least once a week on these. And then I use a steel. And you know, you don't have to be fast and fancy with the steel. Do what's comfortable, do what's safe. So I just give it a lick like that. Good enough. All right. In case it's not clear, I've got my work surface here actually covered with plastic wrap. I don't have a big ass plastic cutting board to use, so I just do this. And then again, all that gets wrapped up, that gets thrown away, and then everything gets disinfected. When I set my knife down, knife safety matters. When I set my knife down, I'm always careful. Sometimes I fail, probably on this recording, to set it so that it's away, the sharp edge and the pointy edge. So anyway, I'm going to get this down in my sink. You probably won't be able to see, but I'm going to cut it open, drain it. Notice that I've got my paper towels already ripped out, so I can just reach them, again, without worrying about having to get anything else dirty. So you can't see what I'm doing down here, but I'm trying to be very careful about dirty hand, clean hand, and I can use the knife as kind of a pry when I need it. So setting the knife down, reaching for towel, clean hand, moving that to the dirty hand to kind of blot things off. Okay, it's a 20-pound brisket, so I did have to use my clean hand to get after this. So what's that mean? That means that I'm gonna like move some stuff around the sink and then I'm gonna wash. So it may seem overly anal retentive, and you know what? I'm sure there are pros in industry who are screaming about stuff, but you know, I'm pretty comfortable after having tried to think this through, and I'm okay with how I do it. Okay, so back to two clean hands now. All right, so this is a lovely looking brisket. The flat on this was thinner than others I've seen, but it was the best of what they had today. As I am cleaning and trimming, so on the top, I'm actually going to get rid of all of this because it's part of my strategy again. You know, you can say for the home non-competition type person, just cover that over. Well, I want to get rid of it because it's blocking spices and seasonings and the rub from getting into the meat. So I'm going to get rid of it. You know, why not spend an extra 10 minutes? This thing's going to be on the cooker tomorrow for, you know, 8, 10, 12 hours, depending on how it goes. Why not take a little bit extra time here? So I think you can see them, but I've got two bowls over here. One that I use for all the hard, nasty fat and then just the fat trimmings. And then the other is going to be for holding any meat that I cut off, because I'm going to save all that. And that's either going into stew or getting ground up for burger or meatloaf or whatever. So I'm not getting rid of any of the meat that I trim off. I want to save all that glorious stuff. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to pretty aggressively clean all this off. I'll be getting rid of a lot of the hard fat, even some in the seam between the flat and the point. I'll also be doing things like cleaning up the edge here. And then if there's any nasty blood spots, or sometimes you'll find like gray areas from when they heat wash it as they're working through stuff. You know, I get rid of all of that. So now let's talk about the fatty side. Again, remember that I'm thinking about kind of making everything aerodynamic, so there's nothing that's gonna crisp up and burn off. So that means all of this here I'm gonna get rid of. I'll work on shaving the fat down here to about 1/4 of an inch, and I'll be trimming up, you know, trying to clean up slices that may have happened at the plant. And then kind of just getting rid of any of the nasty fat. And like I said, when I do this, I do it fat side down because on my grill, the heat is very intense. Even with the ceramic diffuser plates, a lot of heat comes up and I want to protect the brisket from that during that long, low and slow. I mean, I'm going to be shooting for 225, 250, somewhere in that range. That's a whole nother story about heat drama with my particular grill. But yeah, so let's get after it. So like I said, first thing is I'm going to get rid of some of these pieces because that whole thing there is going to be exposed and that's just going to be nasty. And let's get rid of the towel. So, you know, I'll do a little bit of trimming off of some of the worst fat here because that big chunk, look at that, most of that all is meat, so that is definitely going in the save pile. Just want to get rid of some of that nasty, I don't know, pros would probably know what it is, but to me it's kind of a combination of fat and silver skin and it's just gross. All right, so that's my fat bowl, that's my save meat. I'm going to take a little more off this. Again, trying to keep kind of anything that's going to stick up on its own is going to crisp out and dry out. I don't want that. Sometimes I start on the fat side, sometimes I start on the non-fat side. Just depends on what's going on and sort of how it fell out of the package when I threw it out. Okay, so also be careful how you're using your knife. You want to cut away from yourself. You don't want to be cutting toward your hand. That would be bad and dangerous. If you've been around knives for a while, you've probably cut yourself more than once. So, be aware of where the point is going and where the blade's going. All right, so we're going to be getting a whole lot of this big hard fat out of here because that stuff just doesn't render at all. There's not really enough there for me to fool around saving that. All right, so again, this is like the fat cap side of the flat. It points up here. The seam is somewhere in here. I haven't spotted it yet because I haven't looked for it. The seam being the point between that flat meat, the very lean, and the point, the very fatty, glorious stuff you get burnt ends from. But what we can see here is there's a whole lot of big thick fat here, and I want to get that whittled down to 1/4 inch or so, thereabouts. Slow, easy movements. Use the knife, sharp knife. I can't emphasize that enough. If you weren't in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, you spend a lot of time on knife safety. The sharp knife is important stuff. So, I'm being careful here, picking up and pulling away and then cutting under my hand. And this fat's kind of weird. It's this poofy Aaron Franklin from Franklin's Barbecue. You should definitely look up his videos on trimming brisket as well. He talks about this stuff being pillowy and this other stuff being hard. I think that's a pretty apt description. And if you're using my video as your sole reference for trimming a brisket, stop and make sure you go find some others. There's a lot of good stuff. I was just being particular on some things that are stuff I figured out specific about using my particular grill, and then kind of how I cook, how I smoke, whatever. So just working on getting some of this pillowy goo off. Low, slow, careful about going too deep. If you do go a little deep, it's not the end of the world. Probably by the time I get done carving away, see here, I went a little deep. Not the end of the world. Wish I hadn't gone that deep, but lightning will likely not strike me down. Okay, so another good trick, and a lot of people like Harry Sue, who's someone else that you need to look up for barbecue videos. He's at Slap Your Daddy Barbecue on YouTube. You can find him, Harry Sue, S-O-O. He and other people talk about getting your hand under there so it makes a nice bow. A little mound there, and that makes it easier to cut when that angle's a little weird. Don't worry about taking a whole lot off at once on the flat side here. Small, smooth cuts, let the knife do the work. Don't force it through. And shave it off of there. The thing is, this is going to be cooking for, depending on how things go during the day, it's going to be going 8 to 12 hours. Seems to be kind of the run on my my grill setup. So you got some places where it's a half inch, 3/8, quarter. I mean, don't fixate on it. I mean, give it a good effort and pay attention, but there's not exactly a whole lot that you can do horribly wrong. So again, working hard to keep dirty hand, clean hand. And normally I don't lean on my work surface like this, so I'm gonna have to be careful to scrub all the way up my arms and elbows, but I'm trying to somewhat keep in camera frame here. Maybe I'll show you a picture of my setup. It's pretty humorous. If you're looking for professional barbecue channels, this ain't it. All right. Move this around because I want to get in here. So again, I'm grabbing with my fingers, and it may or may not read well on the camera, but I'm not cutting close to my fingers. I'm cutting well below because I like my fingertips. Trying to get back into guitar playing, and cutting off pieces of your fingertip skin is unpleasant. So some people will work on separating the flat and the point. I'm not going to do that. I'm not also going to do the crazy competition trim that takes a whole bunch of this off, because this is all point. The flat starting here. The competition guys will clean all of this up so that they can season the point and then get burn ends out of there. I'm kind of good with leaving it together. Do love me burn ends. Okay, so I am cutting toward myself, right? But I'm not using force, and I'm well away here, so I'm not uncomfortable with cutting in that direction. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. Be careful with what you're doing. I also, unlike a lot of my other cooking, do not have a glass of wine or a glass of bourbon here. I will have something after I finish this up, but last thing I need, some dulled wit leading to a bad cut. All right, so here's some kind of more hard fat that's on the point. I want to get rid of that. So hard fat, there's a little bit of meat, but that's kind of that bloody nasty stuff. I don't want that in my stew or whatever I'm going to do. Cutting rid of some of that fat. And normally, instead of having this bowl here, I'd be dumping straight down into my trash. But I'm going to show you how much of the fat and the saved meat I get done with at the end, because it can be quite a bit. And again, it's not like if you look at those competition folks, they're taking huge amounts of meat off. I have no desire to play that game. All right. So notice, clean hand, but I can use the back of the knife to kind of help lever some things around, right? So I believe this hard piece of fat right here that's between the flat and then the point here, you can kind of see this hard stuff here. I think they call this the decal. And yeah, that is just this ungodly mass that is not going to render out. And if you haven't trimmed a brisket, you may be shocked how big this Godzilla piece of fat is here. And that is maybe like a third or less of what I'm going to get out of there. But the thing is, even on that long, low and slow, this fat is not going to render out. So I just want to get rid of it. And even if it did render out, it's just going to end up either in the bottom of the grill or clogging up the drip pans or just making a mess. Okay, so I'm getting my hand down in here. Be very careful with the knife. Know where your fingers are at, know where the knife's going. So I got the sniffles and I got a cough. What's ironic about this whole coronavirus thing is the day that the CDC came out with their guidance of, so this was 4 or 6 weeks ago, stop rubbing your face. I woke up that morning and I couldn't open my eyes because I am quite the allergy hay fever sufferer. And here in Southern Oregon, the Rogue Valley where I'm at, everything's in bloom. So my eyes are gloopy and drippy. My nose is runny. For the last 3 years, after some significant life trauma, I've had a pretty good run-in a couple times with bronchitis. So that's kind of where my cough comes from. But, hey, we're staying isolated, and I got this lovely brisket here. Kind of a shout out to Costco. They were handling things really, really well. They limit access into their store. They're wiping everything down. You get a cart. You don't get to get your own cart out of the line. You get a cart that they, right there in front of you, wipe down, hand off to you. They limit how many members can get into the store. They're rationing things like toilet paper. They hand that out so nobody's fighting over it. I live with my kid's 84-year-old grandmother. She got some needs for cleaning products and toiletries, and it's nice to be able to get supplied out there. I'm talking about inane stuff because I got a big ass brisket here, and sometimes my brain just goes off on odd tangents and topics. Sorry. All right, so got a bunch of that decal out. And again, this is that fat seam. So here's the flat, and the grain runs this way. And then the point grain runs this way. And that fat in between there, kind of want to pull some of that out. Again, I'm trying to go for a fairly smooth surface. So I'll end up pushing this down, maybe clean a little more fat out of here. But I'm working really hard. Let's see, yeah, you can kind of see that, I think. I'm looking at my recording screen. So you can see that I've still got some good fat here. I'm going to work to get that out. Man, this love the point. And it's funny, my daughter, who doesn't live here with me, she's off in her own apartment doing her own thing. She talks about how much she loves that point end stuff. Girl after my own heart. Oh, well, I like the flat too. So again, being careful where I'm putting my hand. I've probably got a little sloppy. Re-engage the brain cells, keep the fingers out of the way. Okay, so probably a little more work I'd want to do here, but I'm getting kind of bored of working on this part, so I'm going to start trimming fat off of the cooking surface here. Then I'm going to start doing some of that cleanup of the piece of meat. So if you're looking at stuff, there's a whole lot of both fat, kind of pillowy stuff, and then silver skin here. And again, it's not that I'm competition, but any place that fat, or especially that silver skin is, my rub is not going to get in on that. And I do not want that. So again, my hand underneath, and then I can just kind of shave away. So I want to get that silver skin off. And that is going into the good meat bowl. Work on that fat. You'll find that it is interesting because this is my 4th brisket, I think. So again, don't confuse me with some master barbecue guy. It's just I figured out a few things. I watched a crap load of videos and did some thinking. And then kind of tried to pay close attention to my results as I was working stuff with my grill and my grill setup. And that's a whole different bunch of videos. And on those ones, I probably will drink because I've had some significant struggles with my setup. All right, so let's see here. This part of the flat is extremely thin. And the thing is that over that long cook, that's going to dry up and just burn off. So the thing is, I'm going to lose it during the cook. So what's the point of leaving it on there, right? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just chop that off. Okay, now that's a big ass piece of meat. Saving that. That goes in the good stuff because that will get ground. You know what? I'm going to trim off some of that grody fat though. Not all of it, but most of it. All right, so that is a good piece of meat there, and that goes into the save bowl. And now I've got a much better thickness here that's not going to dry out and just, be a sad trombone noise when I go to eat it. We'll get rid of that piece there too. Trim off just a smidge of that fat. So this isn't perfect. We'll come back to that a little bit, but again, you got a lot of work here. Why not? You can, if you're like the OCD type and just focus in on one thing, that's fine. If you're a little ADD like me, just bounce around, and as long as you get it done at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little flap here sticking up. Again, thin. It's going to dry up, burn off. Don't want that. Even though that's on the better end of the flat, it'd be nasty by the time it got done. So get rid of it. Throw it in the grind tray, grind bowl, whatever. And back underneath. Make a nice little dome. Keep working on that. So I'm not getting 100% OCD with this. So by now I've got all the silver skin off. I got most of the fat off. There's this little bit of kind of a vein here. There's some blood pooling there. If I knew more about butchering, I'd probably know why that was there. Cut that guy off. Okay. So you know what? For the flat here, I'm pretty happy. I'll come back and take a look at the point. Now let's work a little more on shaping and kind of cleaning up the edges. So this edge here, a lot of times, like I said, this will be gray. I guess there's hot water that's involved during the process of butchering the cow at the plant. And sometimes this will be gray because of that. But the thing is, it's open and it's weird grain. And I just don't like that because I don't think it's going to present well. I don't think it's going to cook well. So I'm going to take, and again, use those long cuts. If you need to, wash your knife. Got some soap. Wash your hands. Give your knife another lick or two with the steel. Now again, this is probably going to be, we're already at 31 minutes, and some of that was like I was saying before I injected noise. We're at, you know, somewhere around 31 minutes. Taking an extra 30 seconds to resharpen your knife a bit, hit it with the steel, you know, it just makes sense. Give yourself a little break. You want to be safe. You want to have a good knife, and, you know, it's good stuff. All right, so I made one long cut there, and now I'm going to go back and just work on finishing that up. And then the nice thing about this too is you get another confirmation of how you're doing with your trim. And yeah, there's going to be some extra stuff I need to get rid of there. I'm going to take some of that off before I throw the rest in, some of that fat off, all that in the good bowl, because we want to save that. Okay, now, you may or may not be able to see it from the camera setup. The grain runs like this. When it's been on the grill for 8, 10, 12 hours, you pull that off, you don't really know where the grain runs, because you get the bark and appearance changes, and it can be hard to spot the grain, because if it was left side cow, it goes this way, if right side cow goes that way, or brisket. So a trick I learned, I don't even remember from who, the grain's running this way, I'm going to make a perpendicular cut, and now I know that's my, when I start cutting the flat, this is the angle I want to use. And kind of trim off a little bit of those corners there to round it off, make it aerodynamic again. Save that. So, and again, I apologize, I don't know how well you can see things. I've got a good camera, I just don't know how it's reading here. Things are looking smoother. Things are looking much more aerodynamic. Got a whole bunch of that fat gone. This is still kind of bugging me because just it's not even, it's not real aerodynamic, so I'm going to give it a trim like that, because why not? All right, so now I'm happy with that, but you can see we still got a big ass pile of meat there. Fat. So I'm going to work on this a bit more. Hand underneath. Nice thing about having the hand under there too is you're safe. You're not going to cut yourself. So I'm not the speediest. If you're watching this at 1.5 speed, that's okay. In which case I may look like Speedy Gonzalez, the brisket trimmer. I may have to try that myself. Watch my own video at time and a half. All right, so I got a pretty good hunk of that off. So, you know, I did have that one nasty miss there. Bad me. That's not going to be the end of the world. Got one kind of weird thing trimming up, sticking up here. Okay, so for me, and now that guy's still kind of, for me, in the experience I've had with my grand total of like 4 briskets, I'm happy with where this is at now. I got the fat good, so it's going to be protecting the flat. I've got the shape pretty happy with. You know, got my marker here of, hey, here's where you do your cuts. I've got you know, any little scars and little sticky thingy ups like that. And, you know, I am pretty happy with that. So there's got a couple little other kind of rough pieces here on the point that I just trimmed off because they stuck out after I flipped this over again. All right, so I'm happy with this. So what do I do next? Well, I'm gonna put my knife down in the dirty area, point and blade away so it's safe. I'm gonna wrap this up in plastic wrap and put it in the fridge overnight. The reason I do this at night is the last thing I want to do is I get up about 4:30 to start the grill going. It takes an hour for the temp to kind of stabilize, and yeah, I'll have another video about that. So I don't want to be doing any of this work early in the morning with a sharp knife when I haven't had 8 cups of coffee. So do it the night before, wrap it up, throw it in the fridge. No rub on it because I don't want salt wicking out any moisture. I'm probably going to play around with an injector tomorrow for the first time on brisket. I may or may not record that, depends on how I'm doing tomorrow morning. So that's it, right? Again, the reason I trim this way is I trim so that the fat cap will be down, because on my grill, the most intense heat comes from underneath, and I want to protect the meat. I work on trying to get a good shape so that it's fairly aerodynamic. I trim off any pieces that are kind of hanging out that are not aerodynamic. I work pretty hard on that, the decal, and getting that out so that this will lay somewhat flat. I'll push that down on the grill. I spend more time pulling stuff off the top than a lot of other home folks might, but I want my seasoning and the rub getting in on this. Maybe this was helpful, maybe it wasn't. At the end of the day, I was bored. I had nothing better to do this evening. So hope you're staying safe, and yeah, have a good time grilling. So I realized something I forgot. I wanted to show you and find out for myself how much meat and fat got trimmed off of this. So I've got my scale, I've got this tared so it's zeroed out. All this fat is going to go in the trash. That is 60.1 ounces of fat. So times 16, I don't know. I was raised in California, rural. I don't do math well. I'll figure that out in a minute. 60 ounces of fat. That's going in the trash. And 41 ounces of meat that is going to get ground up for something delicious later on. So there you go. 60 ounces of fat, 40 ounces of meat, 100 ounces that got taken off of there. So pretty substantial amount came off, right? And I can't remember what the price is at Prime, Costco, brisket, maybe $5 a pound. I don't remember. It's in the trash. I'm not digging it out. But it's not wasted money. I mean, I'm saving 40, 16, so 32. You know, that's like 2.5 pounds-ish of meat that gets ground up for something delicious. And then I don't care about that. Anyway, have a good evening.